RuPaul's Drag Race is arguably the most iconic LGBTQ+ television show airing today, and from its humble beginnings at Logo, the show now has an assured place in modern pop culture thanks to its growing presence each season. Now, the Drag Race brand has expanded to launch multiple spin-offs, all with the goal of pushing the franchise even further. Of course, the producers and network wanted to capitalize on the found success of the once niche show, and one of the core strategies has now been the continuous all-star seasons since the surprising success of the now legendary Season 2. Though since then, the show hasn't been able to carry that level of success forward, and the fact that each all-star season seems to be getting closer and closer to each other, the spin-off might be running itself to the ground. With an All-Stars 5 cast now announced, the show is in a position to jump the shark, and if played wrong, the season might end up being the final nail in the coffin. Yet, if played correctly, we could end up with one of its best seasons thus far. While a lot of the original found success of the show could be attributed to the cast, challenges, guest judges, or even the iconic twists, the magic that made Drag Race what it is today stems from its masterful storytelling, as it has been a platform to put stories of queer people of color front and center. It has stood out as an original piece of queer media for over a decade. With this in mind, let's not forget that at the end of the day, Drag Race is a reality competition show. And part of the magic has been how it has balanced out the competitive side with the reality side of it all. Not to say that real elements aren't at play, but we must understand reality television as nothing more than a very well-constructed narrative by the creative team that produces the show. Precisely what made Drag Race revolutionary was how it truly elevated what a reality competition show could accomplish and the connection it had built with its audience, all through the human stories each character brought to each season. Like this, we can start to see the character journey each contestant developed on their season, just like a fictional character in any other piece of media, be it film or television. This series sets the ultimate goal for every contestant to be America's next drag superstar. Out of all the queens, only one of them can meet the coveted prize. That leaves the show in a very difficult position of delivering a satisfying beginning, middle, and end to each contestant, at least in the eyes of the audience. Queens win challenges, backgrounds are explored, emotional breakthroughs are met, and we start to say goodbye to queens one by one. So, by the end of the season, we must make peace with the journey we took and if whether or not the expectations we had were met. The mastering of Drag Race storytelling is best showcased in the storylines of the winners of Season 4 to 6, Sharon Needles, Jinkx Monsoon, and Bianca Del Rio, respectively. I will go into deep details on regular seasons, but with this in mind, we can paint a broader picture of what made the narrative of each season ultimately successful or not. Lately, entertainment has moved to a more episodic approach to its productions, with the development and growth of film franchises and the rise of television with a more cinematic approach. And networks now aspire to keep the audience coming back time and time again by setting up entire universes where, if one story ends, we have another one to fall back on. In some cases, this approach can lead to enormous fan service and critical praise. Yet in some other cases, it can doom even the biggest franchises in history. In its own way and language, Drag Race is now building its recurring universe with the basis of the regular seasons, a new UK branch and even more international adaptations, guest appearances of familiar faces and secret celebrity Drag Race and television specials, but more importantly, a second chance to the queens we once loved and All-Stars. Therefore, All-Star seasons face a bigger challenge narratively than a regular one. At its core, it's a sequel to the stories we thought we had left behind. To gamble with the stories we had laid to rest could mean we either end up with a bigger, better, and refined version of what we once had, or something we wish had never happened to begin with. Yet, we might have ended up somewhere in the middle. A lot of the magic of what a season might accomplish comes from the casting process, as a way to determine which queens and consequently which stories are worth a revisit, and with even more complexity, which stories might complement one another. So season 1 had a great start just within its cast, as it holds arguably the strongest cast of any All-Star season. It had enormous potential, keeping in mind that the audience expected the spin-offs to keep the format of a regular season, but as with the coming seasons, a twist in the format might have ended up ruining the whole thing. By having the queens competing teams, it basically cut the individual storylines as it left them tied to a small range to work within, at a place where the drag styles of both queens and the team could live. To understand why the season ultimately failed, we can look at the stories of two queens. The winner, Chad Michaels, and the first one out the door, Pandora Boxx. Chad Michaels walked out of season 4 with the storyline of an experienced and well-rounded perfectionist, and by the time the top 3 was picked, it seemed that she could take the crown given her flawless looks and presence. Of course, she didn't win her original season, as she would be brought back shortly after for the first round of All-Stars. Since she came so close to the crown and season 4 had just aired, fans were jokingly saying that RuPaul had made the spin-off just to crown Michaels. And while there was a scare on the first episode, the prophecy ultimately was fulfilled. Chad winning wasn't problematic by itself, but with the constant betrayal of much more loved queens and storylines, and Chad doing Chad, just as the audience expected, made the ending seem too predictable to audiences. At the opposite end, Pandora Boxx was set to redeem herself and bring justice to her fans after being a constantly strong player without any wins. Of course, it goes without saying that Pandora's run of the show was far from the redemption she deserved, as she and Mimi were the first ones out the door. Still, the argument could be made that the season ultimately failed every queen as the outcome and positions were tied to other contestants and not their own potential. Season 2, however, took its time, learning from its predecessor mistakes and delivered what is arguably the best season the show has ever produced, All-Stars and overall, but that's a topic for another video. I would argue that the legendary status of the series stems from two of the most beloved queens the show has ever had. Drag Race has lately been over-reliant on twists to the detriment of the show. Yet when done correctly, it can make for some great TV. Since its first episode, the series started to set the stage for a comeback twist, which didn't seem crucial to the plot until Tatiana was eliminated. After a great premiere performance, it seemed too soon to say goodbye to her the very next episode. On the other hand, Edwards was delivering a bigger, more focused and polished version of who she was, which served wonders for her in some instances, but worked in her detriment in others. Still, Alyssa was on her way to the top until her bad performance in the acting challenge, which coincided with her growing feud with Fifi O'Hara. Fifi herself came to All-Stars wanting to prove her more villainous side was already gone. But as the episodes progressed, her darker side was slowly resurgent despite her efforts, culminating in the legendary speech against Edwards. And so, everything was set in motion for the best episode the show has ever had. Revenge of the Queens immediately picked up the battle between Fifi and Alyssa set in the prior episode, and after the challenge, their roles were reversed as Alyssa found herself at the top and Fifi at the bottom, while Tatiana assured herself a chance to fight. Thus, we ended up with a satisfying end to two plot points, as Tatiana was given her chance to stay, as so did Alyssa, while ultimately beating her common enemy in Fifi. Now, we know that neither queen was able to take the crown home, but whenever Drag Race is able to eliminate a queen with the audience understanding it was her time, that's when the show has ultimately done its job. So, Season 3. Of course, the first of many twists was the winner, BeBe Zahara Benet, being cast. BeBe's inclusion served no purpose beyond the initial shock of a winner competing. given that her drag seemed to have stayed relatively the same in comparison to bigger leaps like Aja. And with no storyline to follow or redemption to pursue, BB could only win the entire season or fail. Weirdly enough, despite being aired just little over a year after its predecessor, third iteration of the series might have the two best examples of growth after the show in Shangela and Trixie Mattel. The comeback queen returned for her third time competing, as a first for the series at the time, after an overall good performance in Season 3. Since she had established herself as a working girl from Paris, Texas, and the efforts of said hard work paid off in the many TV appearances in shows like Glee, Bones, Community, Two Broke Girls, amongst many others. And of course, the potential for redemption was enormous, since it was well known that she entered season with just over 6 months of experience in drag, so the storyline from drag baby to drag superstar seemed too good to be true. On the other hand, Mattel could be pointed out as the first case in All-Stars history where a queen entered the show the winner before even competing. There have been fan favorites returning before, yet Mattel seemed poised to have the perfect run given her comedic talents, musical abilities, and evolved style. It's safe to assume she might be the most popular queen in years despite a not-so-great run in Season 7, and with her online series growing to the point of a full-on television show and an original album of music to be released, Mattel had the audience at the palm of her hands, with a recurring gossip of her about to slay the entire competition. Both queens seemed more than ready for the crown, but the first half of the season was dominated by the quiet assassin Ben de la Creme, whom was basically the soon-to-be crowned winner after her historic 5 challenge wins, 4 of them in a row, until her self-elimination, the second big twist of the season. This left the crown ready for the next in line, which by the end of the season was by far Shangela, with a better track record and perfect storyline to back it up. But the actual outcome drove the audience mad as Shangela was not even able to fight for the crown thanks to the jury vote, the final twist of the knife. Of course, Trixie's win is controversial within itself because of a poor run even within All-Stars and 2 queens before her that seemed to have had it in the bag before the turns the show took. Yet it wasn't that bad of a scenario after all, because of how Mattel entered the season. She ended up fulfilling her story, albeit through a different route. So, with 2 strikes and 1 hit, Season 4 had the difficult task of balancing the scales. Of course, the season could have ended up more like Season 2 if it had waited a little longer, but because of maybe network pressures or producers wanting to get the most out of the series, it actually ran during the same year as Season 3, as they both aired episodes in 2018. Which meant it left little to no time for queens to grow or even the audience to rest from Drag Race itself, as it came right after a Holiday Slay special and was aired right before Season 11 and the first iteration of the UK spin-off. While the season ran a bit more smoothly than Season 3, it ultimately ran itself to the ground by 4 key elements, showcased with 5 of its most prominent queens. Valentina. As queens prior, the Miss Congeniality left Season 9 with her original run on a sour note given her abrupt elimination after establishing herself as the likely winner in the eyes of the audience. And while she had more highlights along the way, the show seemed keen on keeping her despite the lackluster performance during her last episode, even when other queens were rising up to the plate. Similarly to Valentina, Royale seemed to be pushed by the production of the show despite her forgettable performance. The comeback episode of the season felt like a pause in the season's narrative, as no queen was actually eliminated or brought back except for Latrice. Fans even argued that the double stay should have happened between Gia and Naomi, and not between Latrice and Monique, which only pushed the argument of Latrice's favoritism even further. Manila Luzon. Of course, she was the saving grace of the season at one point, after an amazing redemption and build-up. Yet her relationship with other queens and the game at play seemed to be her downfall. As I argue, this is when the queens eliminating one another format died. Her performance wasn't horrible, yet seemed timid compared to other highlights. So when the other queens had the chance, they eliminated their strongest competitor, driving the audience mad as another Shangela moment took place. Trinity the Tuck and Monet exchange. So, ultimately the season ended up quite controversially, after crowning two winners at Drag Race first. While I personally don't believe it's impossible to achieve, a double crowning is a difficult narrative to build, as it undermines the work of the contestants when, out of nowhere, both are given a prize despite the competition pointing at only one crown. Exacerbated by how obvious it seemed it wasn't planned, evidenced by the editing of each individual crowning in a split screen and no actual double crowning being done on stage. Every season since the second one has tried to bring back the magic the show had once had with little to no success. The production of newer seasons hasn't stopped though, despite what we can consider the worst season overall, Season 11 of regular Drag Race, and the controversy surrounding the two past All-Stars. All is not lost with the surprising success of Season 12. Also, a topic for another video. For example, girls like Heidi in Closet, a Miss Congeniality who can get an Alyssa-type storyline, Crystal Method, an underdog-turned-fan favorite, and Gigi Good, one of the only 3 queens with 4 challenge wins in the show's history, all seem like shoo-ins for an all-star season, only by giving the girls at least 2 years to grow, especially since the queens haven't been able to tour or raise their profile afterwards because of the limitations of COVID-19. With a wider break, tougher competition is set, and therefore higher stakes. Who knows, more time might let queens build a bigger audience regardless of track record and become an even bigger redemption storyline. So, after 4 seasons and only 16 months after the latest wrapped up, we find ourselves yet again with another season of All-Stars about to start. And some might feel eager to say the season is incredibly promising, yet past experience has led us to proceed with caution. As any All-Star season, we've learned the potential is inherent as legendary queens come back to further gag the audience. Yet, it's always good to not overhype or write the story before it even happens so the season has its peaks and valleys. Still, we can point to 6 queens who have the potential to bring the season to a satisfying end. Shea Coulee is the clear frontrunner given her 4 challenge wins and being a couple of rose petals away from the crown back in Season 9. Ask any fan if she should have won Season 9 and you'll see how really people feel about her slaying the competition this time around, as the narrative has been written already online that she's going to win the season hands down. Then there's my personal favorite, Miss Cracker, arguably the most beloved queen to come out of Season 10, who had nothing but self-doubt between her and a spot at the top. Her review with the Jews show has led even more fans her way and seems ready to bring it even harder this time around. It could be a Trixie Mattel-like queen as her fandom prior to the run could serve her wonders. The return of more All-Stars 1 cast members is also a pleasant surprise. Alexis Mattel, I hope, is able to bring a more joyful, playful, and nostalgic feel to the show after the overexposure of the Drag Race brand. And Jujubee, who made it all the way to top 3 twice already, might be in the best position to win over the audience as she has never done before. Also, wildcard India Farah, I have to admit, has me more excited than I could ever anticipated, as she might be able to pull off a Tatiana this time around after mainly being remembered for her lip-sync accident with Mimi I'm First. The mere potential seems so promising. Oh, and of course, there's Angina. To those who might not be too deep into the show, it might come as a surprise the news that she has been 1 spot away from being on each season of All-Stars since the first. She was shortlisted every time with little to no explanation as why she didn't end up in the show before. Oh, and there's the twist. Yeah, there's a new twist in the format that seems to be coming our way, one that might at least reinvigorate the series. Let us pray to the Ru gods that the new twists and familiar faces work well enough to bring us a satisfying journey, before we hopefully rest from All Stars yet again. Thank you so much for watching. Please give it a like and share it if you like it, please. This is the first video I've done, and I have many more ideas and videos on the works. I was waiting to have like the perfect equipment and the perfect moment to record everything, but I just decided to do it to see what came out of it. So I hope that this grows into something even bigger, and thank you so much for watching.